Diversity, equity, and inclusion beyond compliance to true transformation. And to do so, we have with us Ms. Sridevi Menon, Associate Director and Head HR, PrimEra Medical Technologies. Everyone, let me tell you that Ms. Sridevi Menon is the Associate Director and Head of HR at PrimEra Medical Technologies with 18 years of diverse experience across strategic talent acquisition, talent management, HR operations, and business partnering. Sridevi is a versatile HR leader, a strong advocate for DEI, and a proactive change agent focused on building positive, high-performing work cultures. Everyone, please welcome Ms. Sridevi with a very, very big round of applause.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is definitely my privilege to be speaking here in front of all of you esteemed HR professionals and business leaders. Let me start by making a small statement. DEI is having a moment. We hear about it in boardroom meetings and in ESG updates or policy drafts, but then are we really, there is also one uncomfortable truth. While we are checking all the boxes, there are also some people who feel invisible. Why is that happening? Is there something we are not doing right? So here, that is what we are talking about. How can we have a shift from DEI as a policy to DEI as a culture? Let's talk about what is DEI. Diversity represents variety of identities and behaviors, whatever background people are coming from, where it could be age, it could be ethnicity, it could be religion, sexual orientation, all of these comprise diversity. Equity is fair access to resources and opportunities. How do we ensure that every person in the organization gets a fair chance, fair access, and equal access to opportunities? That is equity. And inclusion of an environment where we foster everyone, environment which is fostering and which is accepting every single person, where each and every individual feels respected, welcomed, and comes and shares ideas and can easily collaborate, contribute, and has a high morale. There, for those, just given some analogy as to what is equity, what is equality, what is belonging, in layman language, just to bring a little fun element here. And I really love those second heels out there. All right, so here, let's look at the DEI landscape. 80% of organizations feel that DEI is important. Yes, there is no negating that. Everyone acknowledges that it is important. 25% of organizations feel ready to implement it. What are we doing about it? Are we coming up with certain structural changes with some strategy in place? 25%, yes, they acknowledge that. And 15%, ladies and gentlemen, is the number where there are actual efforts of linking DEI to measurable outcomes. So you see, awareness is high, but integration is low. So that is something which needs to be done. So despite the awareness, DEI remains under-leveraged. There are many programs, but is it really being translated into outcomes? And that is what we have to talk about. Now, we are at an inflection point. Currently, there is awareness, and currently what we have is performative DEI practices. It is in the form of training sessions, in the form of celebrations and diversity pledges, hiring quotas, but the hiring quotas that lack context, that lack measurements. Who is measuring that? Focus is on short-term goals, limited employee engagement, and what is required? A shift to transformative DEI practices, inclusive hiring methods, or definition of KPIs, leadership accountability, long-term focus, and more employee involvement. Let's look at this DEI funnel. So let's think of DEI efforts in the form of a funnel. At the top, what we have is the awareness. So all the awareness initiatives. So we talked about the 80% that we are aware, that we acknowledge that there is a request, there is a need for DEI, and that is where there are a lot of awareness initiatives. It's there on paper, definitely. Are you following diversity and inclusion in your organization? You'll say, yes, definitely we are. We are a very inclusive workforce, and everybody is aware of it. Behavior, but awareness, we talk about, campaigns and policies and all of those things, but behavior. This is the most important aspect because that is where the real action happens. It's what we are actually practicing. Are we practicing what we are preaching is the question. Behavior represents the policies, the leadership behaviors, performance management systems. How do each and every person in the organization behave? How do your middle management behave? And outcome, last but not the least, and that is the last part of the funnel wherein we see what is the outcome of all these awareness sessions and awareness of all the behaviors. So most engaged teams, the real impact happens when DEI is measured, when DEI is managed, integrated in how we hire, promote, and reward people. And it has to be owned by every leader, and it is not just an HR agenda. Now, what are the key strategies for DEI implementation? And this is something which is mentioned by Harvard Business Review. What works? What can we do in our organization? All this is fine, we know, but actionable insights. This is what we need to do. Leadership commitment, first and foremost. Where CEO or the C-suite, they are talking about it, and when the CEO meets the CHRO or meets the Chief Diversity Officer and talks about DEI, that is where, and not just talks, but comes up with actionable points of action, actionable insights. That is where we talk about accountability. That is where we know that, yes, our leadership is really inclined towards DEI, and there is some long-term commitment. Visible champions. The CEO should be a visible champion and not just a distant observer. Second, middle manager ownership. We spoke about behavior in the second part of the funnel. Middle managers. Now, the leaders might think this is important. HR thinks this is important. What about your middle managers? What about your different departments and people who are actually managing the teams? Do they know the importance? And even if they don't know the importance, are they really doing something about it? Because someone talked about the culture in the, someone talked about the culture. When a new joiner joins the organization, she asked, can I leave at so-and-so time, or am I expected to work for long hours? What's the culture? The managers, when they work, that is where the team members also follow the same thing, and that is what becomes the culture of the organization. So, is there percolation of the culture from the senior leadership to the middle management and then directly to the junior-most person in the organization? And that is where middle management ownership is important. They are the culture carriers. Decisions about projects. If you have people from diverse backgrounds, who is selected for that important project? Who is selected for that client presentation? Correct? And that decision is taken by the middle managers. So they can't just talk about it. Their actions, as I mentioned, will speak louder than words. Are they being really inclusive? If he is someone from the south and you have a person from north who's really good, is he picking the person from the north for the project, or just because I know I have to go have lunch with my buddy with whom I've been working since 5 years, I think I'll pick him or her? So do these points play an important role when picking the right talent? That's something that you can ponder on. Referral system? No, I'm not questioning the referral system.
You're challenging the referral system, right?
No. Referral is definitely, you can always refer your people, but then selection has to be selection of people for particular assignments, has to be completely based on potential and performance. That's all. So here, and that is where the culture, the managers have to define that. So hence it is important. Focus on strategy, not just awareness. Again, the same thing. The awareness is good, but then do we really have, and sometimes it's unconscious bias. Sometimes we're not even aware of such bias. And that is where you really have to introspect. Are we really doing that? Are we doing the right thing? Bias interrupters. Structured interviews and pay equity audits. equity in compensation, so pay equity audits to build fairness into operations. Data-driven inclusion. Measure and publicly report. That is also important. So do we measure what is our DEI numbers like, and are we reporting it? I used to work with Accenture. So there was, when Julie Sweet came in as a CEO, she made it a point, I mean, a lot of people did not like it. I mean, people can like it, not like it. But then just because we're talking about this point, and talking about leadership commitment, both of these, it's an example there. She spoke about gender diversity, and she mentioned that by 2025, we will have 50% gender diversity. And, but then they did it. That was Accenture's commitment to something which was they measured what is the diversity, and they had a specific goal in place, and they had an action plan. And this is not something which was given to HR. It was not an HR agenda. It was a business agenda. It became a business agenda, and today, Accenture has 50% gender diversity in the entry roles. And as far as leadership roles are concerned, again, that is a strong number, but then it is reaching there. So they did not only have it within Accenture, but then they published that data. They had those metrics in place. And that is what we are talking about, have data and leadership commitment. They definitely had that, and hence it reached that. Apart from that, demographic data, levels, department, how many females in IT, that can be. So such data can be, I mean, I'm just giving female and IT as an example, but then it can be multiple permutations and combinations, but we can do our own analysis of our own employees. Elevate ERG, employee resource groups, inclusive hiring practices. We already spoke about this earlier, so we'll move on to the next slide here. So these things are all important for organizations to succeed with and have a DEI culture. Now, if we thought DEI is just something that a feel-good factor, it is not. It is actually linked to business outcomes. And I'm not saying that. It is said by McKinsey, and BCG have mentioned this. So inclusion drives innovation, innovation drives retention, and equity unlocks potential. So when companies prioritize DEI, what we've seen is there's a 35% increase in the financial returns, there's a 45% increase in innovation revenue, and likelihood of innovation leadership of a company being innovative experts is 1.7 times. So that's what the study says. And more examples from businesses would be Microsoft. They have tried their DEI progress to executive bonuses. That's the practice, and then it led to greater accountability and a cultural shift. Goldman Sachs, again, has they require diverse boards for IPO clients, and they brought in a big industry change. BCG linked innovation to team diversity, and they saw a 19% more innovation revenue. So these are some of the things. Accenture, we already spoke about it, so I'm not going there again. These are some of the actual real scenarios which different corporates have witnessed. And as I mentioned, when you have diversity, equity, and inclusion, it also increases your belonging to the organization. And when someone feels connected, they feel more engaged, they feel they belong to the organization, that definitely improves your attrition comes down and retention increases. So apart from that, there is also seen that there is a 50% increase in productivity through belonging, and 1.7 times higher innovation linked to inclusion. Revenue growth per employee is 2.3 times higher. And we earlier were speaking about Gen Zs and millennials. So millennial retention rate is 3 times more when we feel belongingness is more towards the organization. Moving on to the next aspect, who owns DEI? We spoke about this earlier. DEI is seen as an HR agenda, but is it really an HR agenda? No. So diversity, equity, and inclusion is something which has all of the, hence this particular diagram, you will see HR as the foundation or support. So we have to work together with all the business leaders and with employees and teams so that we all collaborate together and ensure that we have a diverse culture, a culture of inclusion in the organization. empower teams with policies and resources. That's what HR can do. HR can play the role of a catalyst. Business leaders, they would be shaping the organization through the strategies and the operations, and employees, and they have to implement all this. And overlapping all of these are the shared responsibilities, which will lead to DEI outcomes to leadership. And we spoke about business leaders shaping the strategy and shaping how DEI would, shaping DEI within the organization. So understanding the role of leadership in DEI culture is very important. And for this, DEI as a culture, diversity, equity, inclusion should be viewed as integral to organization's culture, not just a project. And embedding DEI in our mission, vision, and values is very important. Only then we will see it percolate to all the layers within the organization. Leadership's influence by demonstrating values of openness, respect. Someone else spoke about, sorry, I don't recollect who mentioned, but then you said your attrition, you don't have any cabins, any doors, and that's the openness in the culture that is seen in that organization. And that definitely, when you have an open culture like that, your attrition is definitely going to be low, and you mentioned that it was around 8 or 9%, and that is your leadership influence. The leadership has ensured that you have a culture of collaboration, a culture of inclusion, and I'm sure you feel it is high in DEI. Ongoing commitment from leadership to ensure sustained focus and improvement to cultural practices and values matter, measuring impact. Measurement is very important. We are doing all the right things, but how do we know if we are doing the right things? What is the outcome of all of these things? And for this, measuring is the impact of DEI is very important. Again, few of the inclusion is a leadership skill, not a trait. Some things what we need in our leaders is empathy, curiosity, psychological safety, humility, and bias awareness. We spoke about unconscious bias. So awareness is very important. Only then we can ensure that it is not happening. I just run through those because we already had discussed those points in the previous slides. So what is the way forward? What do we have to do as we are the ones who lead the, who are the torch bearers of culture in our organization? So what do we do? Awareness to accountability. That is the first thing. Include DEI metrics in scorecards. Have it programs to integrated systems, not just awareness programs, but ensure that we have integrated systems. Embed DEI in workflows daily. 3, HR owned to business owned. Promote cross-functional ownership. 4, we have compliance to shift, a culture shift from compliance to culture. That is what we have been talking about. Aim for employee belonging over numbers. And 5, we focus on metrics. Measure progress in DEI practices. And 6, leadership engagement. Encourage active leadership participation. So we spoke about all of these things, and this is what is the actionable required to ensure that there is a shift from DEI as a policy to DEI as a culture. So organizations should prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion as fundamental values, but by fostering a culture of inclusion and belonging, we can enhance team performance and ensure that we have sustainable success. So I'd like to ask you this: what is it, and the last thing that I can ask you is you are the culture bearers of the organization. You are the leaders of the organization. So it is up to you to decide whose voice is going to be heard. Who are going to get those opportunities? Are we going to ensure that each person gets that equal opportunity? And that is something that you have to decide, because ultimately you are the torchbearer and you are the leaders of the organization. So on this note, thank you so much. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We would like to felicitate you. And to do so, I request Mr. Richie Joseph, Director, Human Resources and Administration, X-Cube Labs, to please come upon the stage and felicitate our speaker. Everyone, please give her a big, big round of applause. Thank you so much.